Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee meeting, Thursday, May 6, 2021. Let's read the statement. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as item 1 and 3 on today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to their local planning appeal tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of recipient of the application for a zoning and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comment on these amendments prior to the consideration by the City Council on May 12, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. So this meeting is held by Zoom. We all know the drill. Please stay on mute till you're asked to speak. Use the raise hand on the bottom of your screen. And with that, I'll ask Mr. Desjardins to take roll call. Mr. Desjardins.
Councillor Meehan.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
I know he's there. Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Councillor Gower. Not yet, okay. Councillor Kitts.
Here.
And Chair El Shantiri.
Here. Thank you, Mark. So declaration of interest. See none. Confirmation of minute 21st meeting of 4th of March 2021 of Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee. Is the minute carried? Okay, thank you. We'll go through the consent agenda and then we'll come back to the held item. Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development Plan Service. Zoning Bylaw Amendment 5564 William McEwen Drive. Item number 1, that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for 5564 William McEwen Drive to prohibit residential development on the retained farmlands and permit to a reduced lot width of 20 meters on the severed land as detailed in document 2. Document 2 that the Agriculture, item 2, the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee approve the consultation detail section of this report be included as a part of the brief explanation. On item number 1, is it carried?
Carried.
Okay. Thank you. Item number 2, we do have a presentation by our staff, and that's the Ottawa Rural Clean Water Program 2006 to 2020 review and renewal. So we'll hold item number 2 for presentation from our staff. Item number 3 is official plan and zoning bylaw amendment 2621 Donnelly Drive in Rideau Goulburn. Item number 1, that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council approve to propose amendment to the official plan Volume 1, Schedule A by removing the significant wetland designation from the southern portion of 2621 Donnelly Drive, as detailed in document 2, and B, approve the proposed amendment to zoning bylaw amendment for a portion of 2621 Donnelly Drive from Environmental Protection Zone, Subzone 3 EP3, to a rural countryside RU as detailed in document 3. Item number 2, that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee approve the consultation detail section of this report be included as a part of the brief explanation in the summary of written and oral public submission. On item number 3, okay?
Carried.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Item number 4, we do have speakers, and that's amendment to the engineer's report for the Faulkner Municipal Drain. So we'll hold item number 4. Also, we have a presentation from the Osgood Youth Association at the open mic session. We do have an additional item, and is a motion moved by Councillor DeRose for additional item to the agenda today, that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee approve the addition of this item for consideration by the committee at the 6th May 2021 meeting pursuant to section 89(3) of the procedures bylaw. And basically, this is to do with the direction being prepared and worked at with staff. But first, can we add the additional item?
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. We can deal with this item by the end of our agenda, but we'll go first to item number 2, and we have Jardine Wildman and Tara Redpath to do the presentation. So we'll turn it to, do I see Jardine? Oh yes, Jardine and Tara, they're both here. Jardine, we turn it to you to introduce your colleague.
Thank you, Councillor. So today, Tara Redpath, one of the planners in my group under Natural Systems, will be giving you a brief overview of the review that she's done, which is a requirement every 5 years or so. We do a review of the program, and we're hoping that you all continue to support the program. It's incredibly important, and our dollars can stretch very far out in the community on some of these projects. So it's a great news story for the rural area. And I'll turn it over to Tara. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jardine. Tara?
Yes, good morning, Chair. Thank you. I do have a presentation. It's loading right now. Perfect. And can you hear me all right?
We can hear you and we can see that presentation. Thank you, Tara.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, Chair and councillors. My name is Tara Redpath, and I'm a planner with Natural Systems and Rural Affairs. I also coordinate the Ottawa Rural Clean Water Program on behalf of the city. Today's presentation will provide a brief summary of the program and of the 5-year review that was undertaken to evaluate the program's performance between 2016 and 2020. I'll also provide the key recommendations for renewing and improving the program for the 2021 to 2025 period. Next slide, please. Since the year 2000, the Ottawa Rural Clean Water Program has provided cost share grants to farmers right across the city, as well as rural landowners for projects that protect surface water and groundwater quality. The program offers grants of up to $15,000, which are available for 18 different project types. These projects fall under 5 broad categories, which include nutrient management, soil protection, water management, land stewardship, and education and innovation. The program is delivered in partnership with our 3 local conservation authorities, South Nation, Rideau Valley, and Mississippi Valley. The program was last renewed in 2015 for a period of 5 years with a budget of $200,000 per year, which is funded through a special levy to South Nation Conservation, who administers this program. Although the program has had to adapt during this past year to the COVID-19 restrictions, the funding has continued to flow, and we've been able to offer support to our local producers, contractors, and rural residents during this challenging time. Next slide, please. So this map shows the location of all projects that were completed between 2016 and 2020. In total, the program supported 234 projects, worth a total grant value of just over $627,000. In addition to this, $1.4 million of landowners' own funds were invested in these projects. The project type with the highest uptake was forest management plans, which reflected 29% of all the projects completed. Well decommissioning was the second highest type, coming in at 24%, with erosion control projects representing 21% of all projects. Within the Rideau, Woolbourne, and Osgood wards, erosion control projects, which are shown here with the gold colored dots, were the most popular project type, with most occurring along the Rideau River. A high number of well decommissioning projects, which are represented by the lime green dots, were also completed right across both of these wards and the whole city, in fact. The highest number of agricultural projects were undertaken in Cumberland Ward, and these included projects such as cover crops, manure treatment and storage, as well as nutrient management plants. Within West Carleton March, where agricultural lands are generally less productive, over half of all projects undertaken in the ward were forest management plans, which are represented by the purple colored dots. As well, several erosion control projects were undertaken near Constance Bay following historic flooding on the Ottawa River in 2017 and 2019. In the aftermath of the flooding, Conservation Authority staff attended public open houses and provided affected residents with information on how to repair their shorelines and on the funding that was available through this program. Next slide, please. So the Ottawa Rural Clean Water Program review and renewal was carried out in 2020. We conducted interviews with our Conservation Authority partners, as well as the past program coordinator. We also sent out online surveys to all program and review committee members, as well as all past program participants. In addition to this, we conducted a review of 28 similar programs that exist across the province of Ontario to summarize the trends and to identify possible opportunities where our Ottawa program could be improved. In general, the Ottawa program is very highly regarded, and we received much positive feedback from past participants. The program is also fully subscribed, and we often have a waiting list. Although the program is promoted through a wide range of channels, including various forms of print, through social media, through presentations, as well as at events across the city, many past participants felt that the program isn't well promoted or well advertised. Challenges were also identified at the program committee level, where we have experienced inconsistent participation and vacancies, in particular from some agricultural organizations. So our recommendations for improving the program are based on this input that we received through these interviews and surveys, as well as the review of the similar programs in Ontario. Next slide, please. So I would like to highlight our key recommendations for additions and changes to the program. There are other aspects of the program where we would maintain the status quo, and these are covered off in document 1. So we are recommending that we add wetland habitat restoration as a new project type to this program. This would involve the creation or enhancement of wetlands to improve water quality, reduce erosion, and reduce flooding. A second recommendation is to modify the criteria and/or the grant structure for 6 of our existing project types. So this would include some minor updates to ensure that projects are maximizing their water quality benefits. It would also include some modest increases to the maximum grant amount for some of the project types where we have seen less uptake, the projects that are less popular, but that are also of priority for this program. A third recommendation is to enhance the effectiveness and the efficiency of the program committee. And we have several, or of the program administration, sorry. And we do have several suggestions for this. One is to implement staff level approvals for project types that are considered straightforward. So these projects would include forest management plans and well decommissioning, for example. We would also like to see more streamlined application process by enhancing our online capabilities. And then fourthly, we are recommending that we increase our targeted promotion and outreach to encourage uptake of those less popular priority projects. Some examples of those are tile drain control structures and water course buffers. We would also, so ways to do this are to encourage contractors and local suppliers to continue referring this program to customers, and as well to use social media more effectively to tailor our communications to the priority project types. Of course, we will also continue to work with our rural councillors to promote this program through your channels. We would also like to reassess and reinvigorate the program committee by inviting agricultural organizations that aren't currently involved, as well as interested citizens and review committee members to participate on this committee. And then we would further like to enhance our program's monitoring and reporting by offering participants in the program the opportunity to complete an online survey immediately following their grant payment, as we expect this will generate more of a response and give us more timely feedback for continuing to improve the program. And then the last recommendation that I'll highlight is to continue funding the program at a rate of $200,000 per year for the 2021 to 2025 period. And this would continue through the special levy to South Nation conservation. Next slide, please. So thank you very much for your attention this morning. And with that, I'll take any questions that you may have. I'm sorry, Chair.
Thank you, Tara, for your presentation. Is any question for Tara or Geraldine on this item? See
I
none.
have a comment, Mr. Chair.
So go ahead, Councillor Darouz.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Tara, for this great presentation. And I really in support of the program. And even though that you're looking to explore and add more project to the approval process and more, so farmer can benefit a little bit more to keep this program going. And I'm really in great support, and I'm supporting everything you've been presenting. And I also want to thank you for working with the South Nation Conservation Authority. I know this is program well received by our community and our farmer, and it's really, it shows the success has been coming through in the past, and I'm happy to support the next 5 years. So thank you very much for that and all the work you've done. So thank you, and Geraldine, for this presentation. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Darouz. Any other comment or question for Tara or Geraldine? I see Councillor Meehan have her hand up. Councillor Meehan.
Thanks very much, Chair. My question has to do with the addition of the wetland habitat restoration. Tara, I'm just wondering how much you think that will, in an additional cost, what that's going to mean to the program.
For sure. Thank you, Chair, for that question. That is something that we have been reflecting on, and I think it's hard to say at this point what the level of uptake will be for such a project type as that. We do currently have a category for the retirement of fragile land. So, you know, if you do have wetland on your property or areas that aren't well suited to agriculture, there is a category that does kind of address that. This project type goes a bit further in that it would involve actually creating or enhancing wetlands for habitat. To balance out the additional funding that would be required, we have made a recommendation that erosion control projects should be, that we would like to see priority project type, like priority funding for projects that have more natural methods of repairing erosion concerns, and that also focus on streams that are smaller and that are on agricultural sites. So we see that as offering some flexibility in the way that we offer the funding, even though we aren't requesting an increase at this time. We see that this would be a way to balance out those funding demands if it should arise.
Obviously, you see a need for this.
Yes, well, one of the findings in the review was that over half of the 28 programs that we reviewed across the province do have these types of wetland enhancement and creation or restoration project types. They do call them different things through the different programs, but especially in Southern and Eastern Ontario, we have seen quite a decline in our wetland ecosystems. And this is one way that we can offer some support to rehabilitate these areas or to create new areas. If there's a desire on the part of landowners, we want to be able to offer the support if landowners come forward and would like to do this on their property.
Yeah, it seems that it sort of flies in the face of many of the things that we do in terms of policy. I'll just leave it at that. I'm glad to see it, but thanks so much.
Thank you, Councilor Meehan. See no other hand going up, no question. I just want to say thank you, Tara and Geraldine, for your work on this, and it cannot be more supportive of this during the floods and when the MVCA help out people to protect their property. That was very welcoming news, and we're still working together with the MVCA on this. So we have item number 1 to receive the Ottawa Rural Clean Water Program 2016-2020 review and renewal document 1, and item number 2 to approve the 2021-2025 Ottawa Rural Clean Water Program as outlined in this report and described in document 1. So can we receive and approve item 1 and 2?
Receive
Receive and approve.
and carry. And approve.
Thank you. Any objection? See none. Okay, thank you very much, Tara, Geraldine. Our other held item is amendment to the engineer's report for the Faulkner Municipal Drain, and I believe we have 2 speakers on this, but we do have a small presentation from Mr. Robinson, but I turn it over to Mr. Ryan. Mr. Ryan, turn it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this is the meeting to consider under the Drainage Act of the Faulkner report. It was originally tabled a couple of months back at ARAC, and it was referred back to the engineer under section 57 just to revise the allowances, which Mr. Robinson has done. And there's a fairly significant increase in the allowances to the 2 properties in question, but I'll let him highlight that in his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Mr. Robinson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We did send in a presentation. I don't know if you've got it. Good. If you've got it. Right. Just very briefly onto the next page is that, again, this was referred back to us on the last or 2 meetings ago in March to update the engineer's report to, particularly with respect to looking at the valuation allowances for lands. Now, next page, and I'm just keeping this brief, but basically, in order to kind of meet the requirements set out by the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Food and Rural Affairs and the Drainage Act, our responsibility is to provide a valuation of land that is considered to be fair to the people getting the allowance and also fair to the other people on the drain who are paying for it. So that, and it's basically for land that's taken for ditch widening or relocation. So then next page. So that, again, in order to ensure that the project overall is eligible for grants under the OMAFRA Agriculture Drainage Infrastructure Program, allowance must also comply with the following. So what the suggestion here is the allowance is based on actual land values using the Farm Tax Credit Canada and Municipal Property Assessment Corporation websites. They say may provide guidance, but basically are ones that are that we've been utilizing for a long time. I might add that the Farm Credit Canada, we used to be able to get more detail from them, but now what is available, it's available to everybody, not just us, is averages. So there is an average for all of Eastern Ontario, but it isn't as specific. So we've found that the impact values really are the best available source for us to use. Now, when I say we use them, we don't have access to this information, so it comes through the municipality. So just on the last page then, so that additional research was completed by the City of Ottawa following the initial distribution and referral of the engineer's report to gather further valuation for farm tax class properties based on impact valuation of lands. Now, based on the most recent information obtained by the city, the value of land for land occupied by the modifications of the Faulkner municipal drain has been increased from $17,226 per hectare to $26,560 per hectare. Now, the addendum number 1 that has been sent out to all of the affected landowners provides this updated amount, including the additional amount to the landowners receiving credits, as well as some additional costs related to primarily in this case to the lands that are proposed for development. So that is my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. But before we go to my colleague for questions, I believe we have 2 people signed up to speak on this item. First is Bert Smith from Smithdale Farms and Jeff Dawson. So is Mr. Smith with us, Mark?
Yeah, this is Bert Smith speaking. I
Okay.
am the owner of Lot 25, Concession 6 on the Shea
Okay,
Road
so,
regarding
hold-
the Faulkner drain.
Bert, hold on for a second. So you're speaking from Margaret
Yes.
Smith? Okay. Okay. So
away.
Mr. Smith, you have 5 minutes to speak to the committee. Go ahead, please.
Okay, well, we're the owner of this land and you're going to be taking the full length of the farm, which is almost a mile, to make this ditch wider, which I don't think it needs. But anyways, we're looking at the price of farmland in this area, which is, I don't care what my pack has, it's $20,000 an acre. And you're taking probably 2.5 acres or so from us. That'll never be returned. We can't farm again for generations ahead. My daughter's taken over this farm. We can't replace that land at $10,000 an acre. You're at half price. I don't care how you figured. You're at half price of going land in this country, in this area. If you want me to send you some examples, we sure can. Right here on Eagleson Road, it's selling for $40,000 an acre. This is not ordinary land. This is real good land. And it's going to affect our income for years to come. So it's like me saying to you, would you like to sell your house at half price? Or do you want the going rate? We want the going rate. We grow a snow fence for you fellas, the full length of that farm. We've been doing it for the last 10 years to help out with blowing wind and stuff. So we want something done here. If you don't want to come up to the price, well, then we'll be going to arbitration or something. Hopefully we can get this settled and go ahead. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank
Any
you.
question for Bert? Okay, I see none. Thank you very much. Next
Actually,
is,
Mr. Chair, please, it's Carol Ann. I didn't get my hand in fast. I just want, Mr. Smith, can you tell me, what are you currently doing with that land besides growing the snow fence?
We're growing beans and corn, which this morning corn is way up in price and so is beans. So we get an average of $1,000 return each year on that acre of land or wherever land you are taken.
Yeah, the commodities are increasing quite significantly.
Yeah, well, dated back to last year if you want. I don't care one way or the other. And it's not just what we grow on it. When you make this ditch wider, we have to keep back another 3 feet or so with machinery. You can't drive a big combine down the edge of a ditch.
Mm-hmm.
So we're losing a lot more than what you're talking about. But this land is #1 land.
That's
and
would you describe it as prime agricultural then?
you bet, #1.
Yeah. What percentage of your farm would it represent?
Oh, it's a 99 acre farm. If you take, say, 3 acres off it, it's the income every year that's gone. I don't mind giving this land up for something that's going to help the farmers, but this is just for subdividers in Stittsville. They're going to run their subdivision water down past us. So why should I be the scapegoat to supply a bunch of my land for them? No way.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Meehan. See no other question for Mr. Smith. Is Jeff Dawson with us? Mr. Dawson, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
Okay. So, Mr. Dawson, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. I own the property beside the southernmost section of the Faulkner Drain. I researched the 1975 engineer's report by A.J. Graham Engineering for the drain, and I found that my property was not included nor assessed in the report. My property naturally drains southward into the Flowing Creek Drain, not eastward into the Faulkner Drain. I brought this up with Mr. Franklin, and he explained that due to more modern methods of mapping, it was determined that a small portion of my property drains into the Faulkner Drain. Not surprisingly, just enough so that the drain can be moved away from the Shea Road by about 12 meters. I can appreciate that it's dangerous to have such a deep ditch so close to the road, but I feel that I should be fairly compensated for the land that I'm going to lose. Looking at the cross section of the drain beside my property, it seems that the ditch is not going to be deepened or widened significantly. It's simply being moved further onto my farm. I can appreciate the fact that the allowance values have been increased in the latest version of the report, but going from offering a third of the property value to half the value is not sufficient in my opinion. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Any question? Councillor Meehan, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Dawson, can you explain this portion of the land that hasn't been evaluated? Can you tell me what size you were referring to?
It's about an acre.
Okay. And are you farming this now? What are you doing with it?
Yes, I grow corn and soybeans as well.
Okay. So this would represent a hit to your bottom line.
Definitely, yes.
And are you being offered any compensation at this point?
Yes, whatever's in the report.
Okay, that's what I get. Yeah, I see it here. Okay. So you would be happy if the compensation was increased. You could handle that.
Oh yes, I could.
Okay. And are you and Mr. Smith thinking of teaming up together to go to arbitration?
We are, yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's it for me then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dawson. I don't see any other question for you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Smith, also for submitting your email to us last night. I just want to acknowledge I received it. So thank you. With that, we'll turn to colleague asking for a question for Mr. Robinson or Mr. Ryan. So any questions? I see Councillor Moffat. Councillor Moffat, please go ahead.
Thanks. So just to remind committee of the process here. So this is meeting to consider, and then which is the drainage report. And then you would come back with the quarter revision to discuss specifically the assessed values, of which the quarter revision does have the authority to change assessed values or assessment, sorry, under the schedule in the reports. And then following that, landowners do have the ability to appeal the report and their assessed values to the Drainage Tribunal under OMAFRA. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. But Mr. Ryan, under section 57, I believe whatever Councillor Moffat said is correct.
Yes, just so the Court of Revision can deal with assessments to landowners. These are not assessments, these are allowances paid to the landowners. So these landowners are actually getting paid. They're not being assessed. These are communal systems where the landowners pay for these. They paid for this drain to be constructed back in the day. So it's their drain, it's not the city's drain. So the allowance is dealt with through this process, through the meeting to consider. But the assessments, yeah, to Councillor Moffat's point, the assessments are dealt with at the Court of Revision at the next session.
So when you were here in March, obviously there was a concern then that was raised by both Mr. Smith and Mr. Dawson about what we were basing it on, which was MPAC assessed values from 2016. So no question they're outdated. And unfortunately, we just heard in recent weeks that they're pushing off the updates to the assessed values from MPAC out to 2022. But we were able to obtain some new information, which allowed us to come up with a higher value to then provide a greater allowance. Is there any other, because the issue at play here is assessed value versus market value. Has there been any other drainage process through Ontario where you could base allowances on market value? Has that been tested? Has that been shown? Has that been used anywhere else?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the industry standard, I'm not aware of any. The industry standard, I'll let Mr. Robinson speak as well, but the industry standard and the guide for the drainage engineers in the province of Ontario and from OMAFRA is to use the MPAC values of the Farm Credit Canada values. They don't get into speculation with respect to market values. Andy, would you like to comment further?
Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you just said to unmute myself there. No, I think basically that's it. The problem with something, and I guess from our point of view, is we I think are required, but certainly like to use something that is available and is defensible, and that basically an organization has come up with a value rather than trying to I guess deal with something short of going to the extent of actually having an appraisal done, which I'm not aware of that happening. But another option that is in the drainage engineer's guide is to use a value that the municipality would have established for purchasing additional land for road allowances. But I'm not aware, for instance, the City of Ottawa has established such a value. So the options that are there, primarily the MPAC is really the operative one, and this farm assessed information, which, as I mentioned, is in a very general way available. So I think in principle, I'm not aware that other than there could be a specific situation where there has been a requirement to actually have an assessor assess land and arrive at a value, but it's not normally done.
So since it's not normally done, if this committee, if we had directed you to calculate the allowances based on market value, would those paying actually have the right to also appeal that to the tribunal, because it wouldn't be in line with other allowances in municipal drains in Ontario?
Yes, they would. It's and I think Dave has pointed out that the Court of Revision can deal with assessments, but they cannot deal with allowances. So if there is an appeal to allowances, it would go to the tribunal. But you're absolutely right. If the people who are being assessed the cost as a result of the allowances, they would certainly have the same right to appeal and to speak to that.
So, the process lends itself to the tribunal being the most suitable place to dispute allowances.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's really the only place that it could be dealt with if it's going to be challenged.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Moffat. Councillor Meehan.
Just like what I do. Thank you, Chair. Just sort of following up on what Councillor Moffat was talking to. How like if this was to be appealed to a how often, like if we don't deal with it now and we put it off and we allow the landowners to appeal to another tribe, how often does that actually end up in success? I would love to see us at ARAC do something to protect the landowners. Number one, because this is prime agricultural land, and we have signed a document that we are supposed to be protecting agricultural land. We will be losing, these gentlemen will be losing the potential to continue to grow cash crops. It's not an insignificant loss. It is due to development, and we have voted to protect our agricultural land from further development. So I think it would be incumbent on us, whatever the process. I understand there is a process, but it has to start somewhere. And if we can direct that this land be assessed and the landowners be compensated fairly, I think this would satisfy a lot of concerns. I'm certainly, I will defer to Councillor Moffat. He is the drainage expert. I am not. I don't understand these, but I do know what it means for these landowners to lose this potential, acreage. So I would love to see us do something that, I know this is not the first time we've discussed this, but I would love to see some mechanism put in place that the landowners, when they lose it, to specifically to projects like drains, that they are compensated accordingly. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
So thank you, Councillor Meehan. Councillor Gower.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. I understand that doing an appraisal based on a third-party assessment rather than MPAC is not the usual procedure. But I just want to have perhaps Mr. Robinson check me on this. If for some reason an appraisal were to happen, not using MPAC, but a third party, you'd have to use a third party for all the landowners. And since we're using a very prescribed formula that divides up the share amount based on property value, you'd still end up with the same thing. I mean, all the properties would be assessed just in a different way. So it wouldn't make any difference in theory at all as to what share of compensation or of for each property owner. Would it? Am I missing something there?
Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, sorry, just got to unmute myself here. Well, if I'm following what you're saying, if the value of the land paid for allowances was increased, then obviously that gets paid by all of the other landowners within the drainage basin. So their assessment would be higher if the value of the allowances was higher. So, and that's a part of the conundrum, I guess, that we have, because based on the Drainage Act and the provision to put in place is we're there to try to balance both the people getting the allowances, but also all of the landowners who pay for this. And by the nature of the Drainage Act, it's not a situation where the municipality is constructing this drain and is paying for it out of taxpayers' dollars. The individual landowners pay for this. Now, as it certainly is the case in the case of this drain and a number of others that we work on in the Ottawa area, that a lot of the improvements are due in many instances to the development of lands, which again has gone through and been approved by council, and but as a result of increased runoff and all, there is a need to upgrade the drains. And I guess it might be it's not my place to kind of speculate whether it would be acceptable to charge more because it's the developers, quote, who are paying. But I think you also have to really be careful of setting precedents, because you next time it may be a drain where it's got nothing to do with development, but it is to do with the drainage of the area, and it's going to be the individual property owners who end up paying for it. I think the other thing, and it's not my place to make this decision, obviously, but to get an assessment done on every drain, if you set the precedents, becomes again another significant cost to get an appraiser in to appraise the land for, if it's for this drain, then the concern I would have is that now sets a precedent to be used on other drains.
Okay, yeah, thanks for clarifying. I'm not suggesting at all that impact shouldn't be used in this case. I just was trying to make sure I was understanding the implications of the suggestion that a different type of appraisal was used. The other thing, and I don't know if there's anyone from the official plan team here or perhaps from legal who could clarify, but we did in the official plan, as Councillor Meehan has recognized, put some protection around farmlands, but I think we also allowed for infrastructure as an exception to that. If there's infrastructure, roads, stormwater, and so on, that there would be circumstances where it's appropriate to put that infrastructure on farmland. And I would assume that drainage like this would not contravene what council decided a few months ago. Can anyone confirm that?
We
Mr.
do
Chair,
have, okay, go ahead, Ms. Int.
Mr. Chair, I'm not certain that anyone is here who can speak to the official plan. I would recommend that this type of infrastructure would certainly not be in contravention of what council's direction is, but we can review that for you and confirm if you would like us to take that back, and I can consult with our official plan team just to confirm that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure actually there was a motion that specifically clarified that, which I'll certainly check, but thank you. Thank you, Christine. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, I just don't have the motion in front of me, but I do recall what you were speaking of. So.
Okay, thank you, Christine. I see Councillor Moffat and Councillor Meehan after. Councillor Moffat, go ahead.
Sorry, the motion was specifically, because I think I might have moved it myself or Councillor Ashtier, I can't remember exactly what. It was specifically about actually not allowing infrastructure in agricultural zones, but it being things like stormwater ponds. So not permitting the stormwater pond to be built outside of the urban area and in an agricultural area so that you could net more space in the urban boundary for development, that your impacts of development had to be embraced within the urban area. The tough thing is that's not a comparable for what we're dealing with right now, because the Drainage Act gives status to these drains. This is a municipal drain. This isn't the first municipal drain that we've dealt with in this instance. In fact, this committee and in Rideau Goulburn alone, Van Gaal, Monaghan, Arbuckle, Faulkner's just another one of them.
Don't forget Cranberry Creek, please.
Well, Cranberry Creek is not a development. That is
but, I mean,
full on farm drain for farm purposes. A whole nother can of worms. If you have 6 hours, we can dive into it. But yeah, so all those other ones I mentioned, though, Monaghan, Arbuckle, and Van Gaal, are all impacted by development, but there's landowner impacts too. And it's just not perfect. And I mean, I've never been one to look to the Drainage Act for fairness. It's not necessarily built that way. It's a tough act to work with, and it doesn't always lend the best result in the end. But it's it's the framework we have to work within, and it's the act that we have to work within. It hasn't been updated since the 1800s, but staff are following the procedures that we have in front of us through this act and coming to this committee. So it's not, there's no perfect science here when it comes to dealing with these things. And Andy, when he speaks to that precedent setting reality, we will have other drains. We had a drain actually in Greeley that also had compensation. And I think it was actually the person who was getting compensation that ended up appealing it and killing the drain. But these can be very convoluted things. But I think ultimately we gave direction to try to come up with a better result back in March. I think we're sitting today with a better result. Is it a perfect result? I think we'd agree it's not, but it's better than where we were 2 months ago.
I see Councillor Meehan, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. No, it is better, but it's still not fair for the two landowners who will be losing prime agricultural land. And I would take exception to what Mr. Robinson is saying about the state setting a dangerous precedent. I think that on a case-by-case basis, we can rule if a landowner is losing land specifically because of residential development, no other reason, then they should be compensated at a market value. If it has to do with other drainage issues on agricultural land, then it is a different situation. And because the Drainage Act is not perfect, we have to make it as perfect as possible for people. And that's what I'm suggesting, that at this point, we have to do better. And if ever there is a reason to do that, it is this situation. We don't want these gentlemen to lose their agricultural, like a portion of their land. That it is not fair. They didn't ask for the residential development. This is land that they have been using. It's their land. And if this was a house, it would be a different story. This is land. And they're not going to get it back once this drain is built. And we know that. And I'm all about fairness. We need obviously the drain is required, but it's not because they require it. If it were up to them, they wouldn't have it. So that's what I'm saying. Like if we run a press, I think this is the time to do it. And I don't think it takes geniuses to say if someone is losing land because of a development or not because of something else. There's two different situations there, and they can be dealt with separately. That's what I'm suggesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So, folks, Mr. Ryan or Mr. Robinson.
Yeah.
So obviously you came back after 2 months with this formula, and we've seen it has increased. So what's on the front of us today is, as we heard from you and Mr. Robinson, so this is not an assessment, this is allowance. So basically, we can vote to accept, or we can, and then the farmers or Mr. Smith and Mr. Dawson, they still have the opportunity to appeal to the tribunal. But what other option do we, because we like any allowance, it has to have a formula. And we heard from Mr. Robinson, this is the formula was used. It's like, I'm looking for, is there's any other way other than accept this today and let the two gentlemen appeal to the tribunal? Is there's any other way you recommend?
So, Mr. Chair, through you, the committee's options are basically yes or no. You can't direct the engineer on how to determine his allowances. Right. That you don't have that power. So he's an independent engineer. Just a couple of points. This drain is not a city drain. It has status. It's a private communal system with legal status under the Drainage Act. These landowners paid for this drain because it benefits their property. Okay, when it was originally constructed, that's what drains do. It provides legal outlet for their water. So all these lands do benefit from the drain. In this particular instance, yes, the subdivision needs improvements. So the improvements are being done downstream. So one property owner is being paid some $38,000. And another one's being paid some $11,000. But the committee's options, again, back to that point, are yes or no. You cannot direct the engineer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ryan. And also, just for clarity to who's, also the farmer are benefiting from the improvement of this outlet.
Yes, and in a lot of cases, Chair, in a lot of cases, landowners are assessed and they're also given allowances. In some cases, it's a wash. It works out to zero, but lands benefit from good drainage. Any farmer will tell you that. Their farms benefit from this drain. Whether they benefit, the engineers determine they aren't benefiting necessarily from these improvements per se. That's why they're being paid an allowance, but their lands do benefit from the drain, which they own and they paid for.
I see.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add there, it's not as if this improvements to this drain are only related to the development. In fact, there's a significant stretch of the drain, and I don't recall which property it's on right now, where there are very steep side slopes and there has been erosion on the drain. And as a result of that, it's an area where improvements should be made anyway, even if there is no development taking place, and would eventually have to be made. And in that particular area, we have required erosion protection in the form of rock protection along that section of the drain. So the other thing, to bear in mind in looking at this is what we did in coming up with the overall assessments. We have said, okay, if we just did some maintenance on this with no improvements, we estimated that might cost, I think it's roughly $69,000. So of the other total of, get the number, it's about the total is $813,000. So $743,000 worth of the improvements are being assessed back to the areas, the block developments, the areas of development, so that these landowners, including the two landowners we're talking about, are getting some significant benefits as well. I appreciate very much the concern about losing the land, and once it's gone, it's gone. But I think it's incorrect to say that the total and only reason for doing these improvements is because of the proposed development.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Robinson. That really clarified. Madam Vice Chair, you have a question?
Yeah, I just to Dave Ryan's point, we're faced with a yes or no. So if we go no, what is the process from there? What are the next steps? What happens?
Yeah,
If
sorry,
I could
just unmuting here.
Just
Andy, yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Dave. Yeah, if you approve the report, then it goes basically to council and it gets first and second reading. And after that occurs, there is the opportunity for any landowner who is assessed on the drain to appeal it to the referee if for legal reasons the feeling is that there's something wrong legally, or to the tribunal on the basis of assessments or technical aspects. I might add, in between going to one of those other agencies, there is the Court of Revision. But I think as Mr. Ryan has pointed out, the Court of Revision, which is made up largely of ARAC or entirely of ARAC, can only look at the actual assessments, not the allowances. So if the committee was to approve this and then it goes to council, gets first and second reading, then there's a time frame in which any property owner can appeal to the Drainage Tribunal in this regard if the concern is over allowances. And
I'm clear on the yes, but I'm not clear on what happens if we refuse it at this stage. What are the next steps?
So if I could jump in there, so there's other landowners that need these drainage improvements, Councillor, i.e. the development. It's tied to other approvals that they have obtained and require. And it's also tied to permits that the engineer has obtained through the Conservation Authority and through Fisheries and Oceans Canada. So If the answer is no, these other landowners could appeal that decision of council once it gets to council to the tribunal or the referee, the drainage referee. But there are implications for the other landowners that need these drainage improvements, including the city roads.
Okay, thank you.
So Mr. Ryan, based on the vice chair's question, so even if we, for any process to move forward, we need to vote on this item. Voting for yes, it doesn't mean it's a done deal. It means that whether the farmer or other can still go for referee review or can go to the tribunal. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
So doing nothing really is not an option here. Like, I mean, it's gonna help the process and for all parties, because if we want to move forward, you have to create that opportunity, whether whoever going to appeal, they can appeal then. Because right now there's no appeal process if we vote no. So that means that report will be frozen and no work will be done, and then will be challenged for not doing so. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so colleague, I mean, whether we first of all, we cannot make change to the assessment here or to the allowance here, and all what we can do, vote on this and move forward, let it go to council, and if the two farmers or other feel they need to request review or appeal to the tribunal, then that's their opportunity. So obviously, I see we need to take a vote. So the vote is going to be refer back to the engineer from this report. So that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend that council adopt the engineer's report prepared by Robinson Consultants, Inc., entitled Amendment to the Engineer's Report for the Faulkner Municipal Drain dated December 2020, and Addendum number 1, date March 2021, and give first and second reading to the bylaw attached as document 2 to this report in accordance with the sections 42 and 45 of the Drainage Act of Ontario. So Mr. Desjardins, I think we should take a vote on this item.
Yes, Chair. Councillor Meehan,
No.
Councillor Moffat,
Yes.
Councillor Darouz,
Yes.
Councillor Gower,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kitts,
Yes.
and Chair El Shantiri.
Yes.
So 5 yeas and 1 nay.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Desjardins, and thank you, Mr. Robinson and Mr. Ryan. So we have the additional item we agreed earlier to add to our agenda, and that's a direction prepared by staff with Councillor Darouz on the biosolid program. I think I'll turn it over to Councillor Darouz. You don't have to read the whole motion. I think most of us saw the notice of motion, but now since it's only direction, I think will make sense to deal with it. If Mr. Desjardins, for some reason, we cannot prepare a report for this coming council, I think the report can wait till the next council after this one. But let's have Councillor Darouz introduce his direction, and we'll go from there. Councillor Darouz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep it very brief. I'm not going to read it all, but I'll give a quick couple highlight why we're doing this. And this is a good learning experience and best practice that we've experienced in Osgoode Ward 20. There is a new product actually introduced to the farmer, and it is a biosolid pellets. And this is the first time that's been implemented in the city. So it created a lot of problem between the resident and the smell. Of course, farmer always their ambassador of the land. So there is some experience, and the city of Ottawa has a process on our biosolids. So we're thinking there is best practice and people could learn from it. From our experience with working with OMAFRA and Ministry of Environment, so we will ask our staff, therefore, to be resolved that the Ottawa City Council direct the General Manager, Public Work and Environmental Services, or his designate, to write to the Minister of OMECP and OMAFRA, as well as the CFIA, in consultation with the Mayor and rural councillors, to outline key concerns and potential considerations from Ottawa's perspective to help inform the development of the best management practices aimed at pelletized biosolid producers and local farmers. So thank you, Mr. Chair. This is very self-explanatory, and hopefully that my colleague will support that. You're on mute, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Derousse, for this, and I see staff been involved and prepared this this motion. Mr. Desjardins, if we accept this as a direction to staff, does it have to necessarily come to this next council in a couple of days because you need to prepare a report, or we can wait till the council after that? Like, it's no real timeline on this one.
Well, there was originally a notice of motion which would have gone to the June, but I can prepare a report to go to council next week, or as the committee prefers, the next council after that. It's up to you.
I don't think we'll make a difference for the committee, except for you guys as a staff, as a clerk staff, if you have enough time to prepare a motion for the next council. If it's not, I guess we can wait to the council after that.
That's fair, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so folks, can we accept that as a direction to staff moved by Councillor Derousse?
Accepted, yeah. Moved.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Derousse. And now we have the fun stuff. So we have an open session, and we have the Executive Director of Osgoode Youth Association has a PowerPoint presentation for us. So, and Nicole, I know you give us the full presentation before, but today you're going to give us just a small portion of that presentation. So the floor is yours.
Great. There is a PowerPoint presentation that goes along. Oh, good. It's coming up now. Beautiful. Thank you. I'm glad I'm the fun part of the presentations. So my name is Nicole McCarricker, and I'm the Executive Director of the Osgoode Youth Association. Joining me here today, and I'm not sure if she has been joined here yet, is Emily Doswa. Oh, yeah, thank you, Emily. So Emily is the Evaluation Coordinator for the Rural Ottawa Youth Mental Health Collective. And we've been invited here today to give you an update on an important initiative called the Rural Ottawa Youth Mental Health Collective that is taking place in rural Ottawa. So I was fortunate to attend an ARAC meeting in 2018 when we were just getting started on this project. And I'm really excited to be here today to let you know what our group has accomplished in the meantime. So next slide, please. So the reason that our collective was formed in the first place was out of a shared concern about the lack of accessible and consistent mental health services, education, and support for rural Ottawa youth. So this slide is important. Many of you know me from the Osgoode Youth Association, and the Rural Ottawa Youth Mental Health Collective is actually comprised of partners from all of Ottawa's 4 wards with rural populations. So this is not just a single ward initiative. Our group has representatives from youth centers, CHEO, the city's Rural Affairs Department, youth mental health counselors in all 4 wards, and community resource centers in all 4 wards. So the most important thing to note here on this slide is the involvement of youth with lived experience on our collective. One of the key components of the collective's work is to engage youth with lived experience of accessing mental health supports while living in rural Ottawa. So these youth form a youth advisory committee made up of youth aged 13 to 23. And it's really important to us that the work that's being done for youth is done in consultation with these youth. And next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this is the reason that our collective came together in the first place. And I'm sure that you as folks that are representatives of rural Ottawa, what I'm going to present today isn't coming as a big surprise. Rural youth have the same mental health needs as their suburban and urban counterparts, but nowhere near the same access to those mental health services. Next slide. At the start of our initiative, we conducted a community needs assessment to learn about the state of mental health services for rural Ottawa youth. And this quote here is indicative of what we heard from most rural youth and their support networks. So when we asked what mental health supports would you like to see for youth in Osgoode Ward at one Osgoode Ward focus group, the response we got back was literally anything. Next slide. So that's bad news, but the rest of the presentation is all good news because the good news is that we can change this. Very recently, so just in February of this year, our collective conducted a survey of rural Ottawa youth, and we had an amazing response rate. Over 300 youth aged 12 to 24 took an online survey to find out how supported they're currently feeling with their mental health, how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected their mental health, and what steps we can take to increase that level of support. Next slide. So this survey is actually a really exciting first for rural Ottawa. It's the first time that a single survey has been used to check in with youth in all of Ottawa's rural wards and analyze those results together as a group. The survey was quite large. It took youth on average about 17 minutes to complete. And we have a ton of data that we've collected from that survey. So today, Emily and I are showing just a few small pieces of that data. But if anybody would like to see more of the results, I would be very happy to share those with you. So Emily, if you go to the next slide, then I will have you share these results.
So I know you already received the bigger presentation with more results, but we chose a few that we just wanted to highlight today. So the first result that we had was to the question, what changes have you noticed in your mental health due to the COVID-19 pandemic? We were not surprised to learn that one of the most popular responses was that their mental health has worsened. And the other most popular response was that sometimes it's worse and sometimes it's better. And if you go to the next slide, we also asked, what is the biggest barrier for you to receiving the mental health support that you need? The top 5 answers were the distance to accessing support, the knowledge of the resources that exist, the stigma with the people around them, isolation. So isolation is in this context either due to COVID or due to the fact that rural communities are themselves isolated. And the 5th response was parents. So that can mean parents not believing that their child needs help, or youth not feeling comfortable talking to their parents at all. Next slide. And then the bulk of our survey was asking youth about what types of programs would help them and how they would want those programs to be structured. The top 7 programs out of the whole survey were programs about stress and anxiety, time management, positive lifestyles, how to help someone experiencing a mental health concern, body positivity, mental health literacy, and self-care. Next slide.
Great. Thank you, Emily. So as I mentioned, those were just a few small tastes of what we learned from our survey. And this kind of gives you a bit of a look of the big picture. So when we looked at all of our survey data, our collective created this theory of change, which is kind of a roadmap for what we can do going forward to help rural youth feel more supported with their mental health. So as you can see, the theory of change has 5 strategies. We have youth mental health education, youth mental health counseling services, support network mental health education, a communication of existing resources, and community engagement. Next slide. So I would like to provide you with just one example of the kinds of activities that can take place under these strategies. So this is, I'll kind of address these little points on the next slide here in a minute. But the collective currently has an application out to the Laidlaw Foundation to test one of our strategies, which is the communication strategy. So for this project, we're partnering with CHEO's YouthNet program. And before COVID, what YouthNet did was make in-school presentations to Ottawa youth about mental health resources available in their community and where they can turn for help if they're experiencing a mental health concern. So in Ottawa, there are 22 schools that serve rural Ottawa students. Pre-pandemic, YouthNet gave their mental health presentation to just 3 of these schools. So when you think back to our survey results, that one of the biggest barriers for rural youth to get the mental health support they need is knowledge of resources, that's not really a surprising result. The fact of the matter is they just simply haven't been given those tools yet or communicated those resources. So the work of the collective can change that. So if we are approved for, to have this funding from Laidlaw, then YouthNet and the collective are organized and ready to go, and we'll be able to give these mental health resource presentations to all 22 of those rural serving schools in the fall of this year. And so that's just one small example of the kind of impact that a dedicated youth mental health collective could have in rural Ottawa. So this slide here kind of gives you an idea of the strides that we have already made to address these strategies. So what you see here is mostly with my Osgoode Youth Association hat on. I'm talking to you in 2 different ways for this presentation. So OYA is actually the backbone organization for the Rural Youth Mental Health Collective. But as the executive director of OYA, I have applications currently out for Bell Let's Talk funding, Laidlaw funding, and the City of Ottawa's Renewable Community Fund to do individual projects in Osgoode Ward. However, what the collective believes is best for all rural youth moving forward would be to find funding for the collective as a whole to implement our strategies in the entirety of rural Ottawa. To give you an idea, implementing all of these strategies outside of the rural youth mental health counselors themselves would be approximately $250,000 annually to achieve the result of rural Ottawa youth feeling supported with their mental health or knowing where to go if and when they need support. So next slide, please. So we have created social media accounts for the collective. So you can follow our work on Facebook and Instagram, and our handle is Rural Ottawa Youth. This is a great way, if you're interested, we'd love it if you could share these resources through your channels. But this is how we're going to be communicating both with youth and stakeholders going forward about the progress of our project. And next and final slide. So this is my email address, so nicole@o-ya.ca, or you can visit OYA's website, which is o-ya.ca, and that has much more information about both OYA and the collective. And then if you have any more details about the collective or our survey or the work that we're doing, I'd be more than happy for you to email me and we can chat. But I'm also happy to take questions now if you have.
Thank you very much, Nicole and Emily, for your presentation, and thank you. This is, I think, the second time I heard that presentation from you, and so, yes. I'm going to turn it first to Councillor Deroux since he's your councillor. So, Councillor Deroux, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unlike you, I heard this presentation multiple times throughout Nicole and of course Emily that we have here with us. I just want to mention Emily, also the president of Osgoode Village Community Association. She's a great and one pillar volunteer in our community, of course, with Oya and Nicole and Emily and their team. It's been amazing help for our to implement programs in Osgoode Ward and also across the city for rural youth. So thank you very much for your hard work. I'm happy that to be always supporting of the programs and everything you present, and we appreciate all the work you do behind the scene especially for our rural youth. I know that I've seen this presentation multiple times, but when I see the result of the survey, I cannot agree with you more. Transportation, the stigma, and many other elements that how you created this survey for the collective. And I'm happy to see that there is programs like that start aiming to help our rural mental health youth in finding some solution and working with them. So thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for accepting them today to do this presentation for our at ARAC. So I appreciate all the work.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Jarouz. And Madam Vice Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. You know, it's great to see the work that you're doing, and thanks for taking the time. Just quickly, I think I might be your newest Instagram follower, so you know, the direction to share on social media, I'll absolutely take that away. But is there anything else as individual counselors we can do to support you in getting the message out aside from sharing on social media?
So that's a great question. I think, you know, there's kind of two ways to support. The first is if you know of any funding that is, you know, would be applicable to this area, it would be greatly appreciated. I know just Councillor Jarouz has already connected us with United Way for us to present our ideas for potential funding there. So, you know, any of those connections you have would be much appreciated. And as soon as we get the ball rolling with getting all this information out and with implementing our activities, just sharing those resources and letting the youth in your communities know where they can go to access mental health support would be really beneficial.
Absolutely, happy to do that. So share any resources anytime, and you know, we can all put them in our newsletters and on our websites and that kind of thing. So thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair. Those are so, Nicole. I think most of us council in the rural area specifically, we have the newsletter that goes out. Some of us weekly, some of us bi-weekly. But if you share any information you'd like us to share with our resident, feel free to send it to us or include us in your mail out, and we can share them with our social media as well. So with that, I want to thank you and Emily for being here today and sharing that information with us. Thank you so much for what you do to, and you know, we hear it time and time again, the resource center also is a great resource for our youth and and still a lot of people, you know, that, you know, tell us, oh, I never heard from them, or I haven't heard from this organization. So we have work to do and try to promote it more. So I hope with your engagement to us on social media, we can deliver some of that message.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. We were really surprised in the survey, actually, those results that we got back. We asked whether youth knew about, you know, YSB or the Kids Help Phone or walking clinics and that kind of thing. And then the number of youth that didn't have any knowledge of those resources was surprising to us. So getting the word out there is important. Thank you for this opportunity. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And you already have an invitation from West Carleton Online to do an interview with you about the Ottawa rural youth. So there you go. So thank you very much, Nicole and Emily, and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we can just receive this presentation from Nicole and Emily. And inquiries, to date, we don't have any inquiry. Mr. Desjardins, no inquiries?
No, Mr. Chair.
I see none. Other business? Did I forget anything, Mark, before we go to adjournment? Next meeting is Thursday, June 3rd, 2021.
Correct.
Okay, adjournment.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.